Please don't make me go back, the boy begged. Then a Hell's Angel saw his torn school shirt. Tank Morrison rolled the metal door down on Steel Horizon and locked it with a heavy click. The sun was starting to dip behind the row of buildings on 5th Street, turning the sky orange and pink like someone had spilled paint across it. His back ached. His hands were stained black with grease that no amount of soap ever fully washed away. It had been a long day. 3 oil changes, a busted carburetor, and a kid who wanted his dirt bike painted flames, even though Tank told him twice that flames were extra. He stretched his arms over his head and heard his shoulders pop. 45 years old, and every year the wrenching felt a little heavier on his body. But he loved this shop. Built it himself, board by board, after 20 years of riding taught him more about engines than any textbook ever could. Steel Horizon wasn't much to look at from the outside, just a squat brick building with a hand-painted sign. But it was his, and that meant something. He grabbed his helmet off the hook by the door and walked over to his Harley, parked in its usual spot under the flickering streetlight. The bike was a deep matte black, scratched up in places from years of use, but it ran smooth as silk. Tank swung his leg over the seat and settled into it the way a man settles into an old recliner. Comfortable. Familiar. He turned the key and the engine rumbled to life underneath him, a sound that always made something in his chest loosen up after a hard day. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. He pulled out of the lot and onto the road, letting the wind hit his face as he picked up speed. This was his favorite part of the day. The ride home. No customers yelling about prices, no invoices to fill out, just the open road and the low growl of the engine beneath him. He passed the hardware store, the laundromat with the buzzing sign, and the little diner where he sometimes stopped for coffee when he couldn't sleep. Up ahead, Miller's gas station came into view, same as it always did on this route. It was a plain little station, 2 pumps and a convenience store with faded advertisements taped in the windows. Tank had been riding past it for years, never thought twice about it, just another landmark on the way home. But tonight, something made him slow down. He couldn't say what it was at first. Maybe it was the way the evening had gone unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that made a small sound carry farther than it should. He eased off the throttle, the bike slowing to a crawl as he passed the edge of the gas station lot. That's when he heard it. Crying. Not loud, not the kind of crying that draws attention on purpose. This was quiet, muffled, like someone trying hard to keep it hidden. The kind of crying that came from someone who didn't want to be found. Tank's instincts, sharpened by years of reading trouble before it happened, told him something was wrong. He pulled the Harley off to the side, right along the edge of the gas station property, and cut the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy. He sat there for a second, listening. The sound was coming from behind the dumpster near the back corner of the lot, half hidden in shadow. He swung off the bike, boots hitting the pavement with a soft thud, and walked toward the sound. Slow. Careful, not wanting to spook whoever it was. "Hey," he called out gently, his deep voice softer than most people would expect from a man his size. "Somebody back there?" The crying stopped for a second, then started again. Quieter this time, like the person was trying to swallow it down. Tank rounded the corner of the dumpster and crouched low, trying to make himself less imposing, less like the towering, tattooed biker he knew he looked like to most people. What he saw made his chest tighten. A boy. Couldn't have been more than 11 years old. Knees pulled up to his chest, arms wrapped tight around them. His school shirt was torn clean at the collar, hanging loose off one shoulder. A fresh bruise was blooming dark and angry on his cheek. His eyes, wide and wet with tears, snapped up to meet Tank's, and pure terror flashed across his face. The boy scrambled backward, clutching his backpack in front of him like a shield. "Please don't make me go back," he begged, voice cracking and small. Tank froze, kneeling there in the gravel, unsure of what to say or do next. Tank stayed right where he was, not moving an inch closer. He'd learned a long time ago that scared things don't need you coming at them. They need you to hold still. "Hey now," he said, keeping his voice low and even. "I'm not going to make you do anything. You hear me? Nobody's making you go anywhere." The boy didn't answer. He just pressed himself harder against the brick wall behind the dumpster, like he was trying to disappear into it. Tank lowered himself the rest of the way down, easing onto one knee in the gravel so he wasn't looming over the kid anymore. His knees complained about it, same as they complained about most things these days, but he ignored that. He set his helmet down beside him, slow and deliberate, so the boy could see his hands were empty. "Name's Tank," he said. "I know, funny name. My mama named me Thomas, but nobody's called me that since I was about your age." He offered a small smile, careful not to show too many teeth. Big man, big smile. That could look like a lot of things to a scared kid, and none of them good. "What's your name?" It took a long moment. The boy's chest was still hitching with little leftover sobs, the kind that come after the big crying is mostly done. Finally, in a voice so quiet Tank almost missed it, he said, "Charlie." "Charlie," Tank repeated, like he was setting the name down, careful, somewhere safe. "Okay, Charlie. I'm not going to touch you. I'm not going to grab you or nothing like that. I just heard somebody back here who sounded like they were having a real bad day, and I wanted to make sure they were all right. That's all this is." Charlie's eyes flicked to Tank's arms, covered in ink from wrist to shoulder, then to the leather cut he wore over his flannel shirt, the patches on it worn soft from years of weather and road dust. Tank watched him take it all in and braced himself for the boy to bolt. He didn't bolt, but he didn't relax either. When Tank shifted his weight just slightly, trying to get more comfortable on the hard ground, Charlie flinched so hard he banged his elbow against the dumpster. Tank went still again. "Sorry," he said softly. "I'll stay right here. I won't move sudden like that again." Slowly, so slowly, it felt like watching ice melt. Something in Charlie's shoulders came down a fraction. Not trust yet, just the tiniest bit less fear. "You don't have to tell me anything," Tank said, "but if you want to, I got time. I'm not in a hurry to be anywhere." Minutes passed. The gas station sign buzzed overhead. A car pulled up to the pump on the far side, and Charlie's whole body tensed until the driver got out, paid no attention to the dumpster, and went inside to pay. Once the man was gone, Charlie let a breath out he'd clearly been holding. "They said if I told anybody," Charlie started, then stopped. His fingers picked at a loose thread on his torn collar. "Told anybody what?" Tank asked gently. Charlie's lip trembled. "There's some guys at school, Jefferson Middle. They've been—" He trailed off, eyes dropping to his sneakers. "It's been happening for a while now, since, like, October." Tank felt something cold settle in his stomach. October. That was months. This wasn't some one-time scuffle in a hallway. "They wait for me by the buses sometimes," Charlie went on, the words coming easier now that the first ones were out, like a dam had a crack in it, and the water was finding its way through. "So I started walking home instead. It takes longer, but at least they don't know which way I'm going most days." "Does anybody at school know?" Tank asked, keeping his tone steady, careful not to let the anger building in his chest leak into his voice. Charlie let out a small, bitter laugh that sounded far too old for an 11-year-old. I told Mrs. Draper. She's the one who's supposed to watch the hallway by the gym. She just said boys will be boys and I should stop taking it so serious. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. I told the principal's office too, but nothing happened. Nothing ever happens. Tank stayed crouched there in the gravel, quiet for a moment, letting that sink in. This wasn't a bad afternoon. This was a kid who had been carrying this alone for months, with nobody in charge lifting a finger to help him. Tank let the silence sit for a while, before he spoke again. He'd learned that too, somewhere along the road of his life. Silence wasn't empty. Sometimes it was the only place a person could catch their breath. "Charlie," he said finally, "I think we need to call somebody. Not the school, not tonight. I'm talking about your mom." The boy's head snapped up so fast it startled Tank. No, please, you can't. She's got enough going on. She works 2 jobs, mister. She don't need this too." "I hear you," Tank said, holding up a hand, calm as ever. "But listen to me. Your mom would want to know you're safe. That's not a burden, Charlie. That's just what moms do." Charlie shook his head hard, his eyes filling up again. "She's gonna be so mad. Or she's gonna cry, and I don't want to make her cry." "What I'm not gonna do," Tank said, "is call the police on you. You didn't do anything wrong. But I can't just leave you sitting behind a dumpster with a torn shirt and a bruise on your face and not tell your mama where you are. That wouldn't be right. And deep down, I think you know that too." The boy stared at the gravel for a long time. His hands were shaking a little, whether from the cold evening air or something else. Tank couldn't tell. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, Charlie rattled off a phone number. Tank pulled his phone from his jacket pocket, the screen bright in the fading light, and carefully typed the numbers in. He looked over at Charlie one more time. "You want to sit here with me while it rings?" Charlie nodded, just barely, and shuffled out from behind the dumpster to sit down on the curb beside Tank. The gravel dug into Tank's knees as he settled next to the boy, close enough to be there, far enough not to crowd him. The phone rang once, twice. Charlie's leg bounced up and down, quick and nervous, and Tank set a steady hand near his own knee, not touching, just close, like an anchor. 3 rings, 4. Then the line clicked, and a woman's voice came through, breathless and sharp with worry. "Hello? Who is this? Where's Charlie? Is this about Charlie?" Tank kept his voice low and even, same as he had with the boy. "Ma'am, my name's Tank Morrison. Your son is safe. He's sitting right here with me at Miller's gas station on Route 9. He's okay, but I think you should come on down here." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, and then the sound of keys jingling, a door slamming. I'm coming right now, just, please, keep him there. Tell him I'm coming." "He's not going anywhere," Tank said. "We'll be right here." The line went dead. Tank slid the phone back into his pocket and looked over at Charlie, whose face had gone pale under the gas station lights. "She sounded scared," Charlie said quietly. "She sounded like a mom who loves her kid," Tank said. "There's a difference." They sat together on the curb, the gravel cool and hard beneath them, cars pulling in and out of the station every so often, headlights sweeping across the pavement. Charlie didn't say much more, just picked at the torn collar of his shirt and stared out at the road like he was watching for her, even though it had barely been 5 minutes. It wasn't long, maybe 10 minutes, before an old sedan came rattling into the lot, one headlight dimmer than the other, the engine coughing as it rolled to a stop. The door flew open before the car had even finished settling, and a woman came running across the pavement, her work uniform still on, her hair falling loose from its ponytail. Charlie!" she cried, and dropped to her knees right there on the gravel, pulling her son into her arms so hard he nearly lost his balance. She held him like she was afraid he might disappear if she let go, her whole body shaking with the force of her sobs. "I didn't know," she said, looking up at Tank over Charlie's shoulder, her face streaked with tears and mascara. "I swear to you, I didn't know it was this bad. He never said anything. He never told me." Denise held Charlie a moment longer before she stood up, brushing the gravel dust off her knees. She reached down and pulled her son up beside her, one hand still gripping his shoulder like she wasn't ready to let go just yet. "Thank you," she said to Tank, but her eyes darted away from his face as she said it. They landed on his vest, the patches, the leather, then bounced back down to the ground. "I mean it. Thank you for calling me, for staying with him." "Wasn't a problem, ma'am," Tank said, staying where he was on the curb, giving her room. Denise nodded, quick and stiff, the kind of nod people give when they don't know what else to do with their hands or their face. She was still in her work uniform, a name tag that said Denise pinned crooked on her shirt, and Tank could see the tiredness sitting deep in her eyes, the kind that didn't come from one bad night. It came from months of them, maybe years. "Come on, baby," she said to Charlie, tugging him gently toward the car. "Let's get you home. Get you cleaned up." Charlie glanced back at Tank once, quick, like he wasn't sure if it was okay to leave without saying something. Tank just gave him a small nod, the kind that said, "Go on, you're all right," and that seemed to be enough. Denise was already fumbling with her keys, her hands not quite steady, when she pulled open the driver's door and slid inside. Charlie climbed into the passenger seat, and Denise turned the key. Nothing happened. She tried again. A weak clicking sound came from under the hood. Then silence. She smacked her palm against the steering wheel, quiet, more tired than angry, and let her forehead drop against it for a second. "Not tonight," she muttered under her breath. "Please, not tonight." Tank was already up off the curb before she even looked over. He walked to his motorcycle parked a few yards off, the big Harley gleaming under the gas station lights, and popped open one of the saddlebags strapped to the back. He pulled out a set of jumper cables, worn but sturdy, coiled up neat like he'd done this 100 times before. "Pop your hood," he called over, already walking toward the front of her car. Denise looked up, startled. "Oh, no, you don't have to. I can call someone. AAA, or my brother, he'll come." "It's no trouble," Tank said, already lifting the hood before she could argue much further. "Won't take 5 minutes." She sat there a moment, watching him through the windshield, like she wasn't sure what to make of a stranger just fixing her problem without being asked twice. But she reached down and pulled the little lever anyway, and the hood popped with a soft thunk. Tank worked quick and sure, clamping the cables onto the battery terminals, then walking them over to his own bike, which he'd angled close enough to reach. Charlie leaned over from the passenger seat, watching through the open window, his eyes following every move of Tank's hands like he was trying to memorize it. "You know how to do that?" Charlie asked, his voice still a little rough from crying earlier, but there was something else creeping into it now. Curiosity. "Learned a long time ago," Tank said, not looking up. "Man's got to know how to take care of his own ride. Comes in handy for other things, too." After a minute, he had her turn the key again. The engine coughed, sputtered, then caught, rumbling to life with a shudder that smoothed out after a few seconds. Denise let out a breath she'd probably been holding the whole time. "Oh, thank God," she said, laughing a little, though it came out shaky. She dug around in her purse and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill, holding it out toward him through the window. "Here, please, for gas or something. I don't have much, but—" Keep it, Tank said, waving it off gently. He reached into his vest pocket instead and pulled out a small card, worn at the corners, and held it out to her. Steel Horizon, my shop. You ever need anything? Car trouble? Anything at all, you call that number. Denise took the card slow, like she wasn't quite sure what to do with the kindness being handed to her. Charlie was watching the whole exchange from the passenger seat. Quiet, but something in his eyes had shifted. Just a flicker. The smallest flicker of trust. The kitchen was small, the kind of small where you could reach the coffee pot without leaving the table, and Denise sat there with her elbows pressed against the chipped wood, the phone pressed hard to her ear. The clock above the stove read 6:45. She had to leave for her shift at 7:30, and she still needed to drop Charlie at school, still needed to eat something herself, still needed to do about 100 things she didn't have time for. But this came first. Charlie sat across from her, a bowl of cereal going soggy in front of him. He wasn't eating. He was just moving the spoon around in slow circles, watching the milk swirl, his eyes flicking up to his mother every few seconds like he was trying to read what was happening on the other end of the line. "Yes, I'll hold," Denise said into the phone, and then she covered the receiver with her palm and looked at her son. "Eat something, baby. You need something in your stomach." Charlie didn't answer. He just pushed the spoon around again. The bruise on his cheek had darkened overnight, purple now instead of red, and every time Denise looked at it, something twisted hard in her chest. She hadn't slept much. She'd lain awake most of the night thinking about all the times Charlie had come home quiet, all the times he'd said he wasn't hungry, all the times she'd been too tired, too stretched thin, too busy counting bills at the kitchen table to ask him twice why his eyes looked so hollow. The line clicked back to life. "This is Vice Principal Coleman." Denise straightened up in her chair like the man could see her. "Yes, hi. This is Denise Watts, Charlie Watts' mother. I'm calling because my son was attacked yesterday afternoon, on his way home from school. He's got a bruise on his face and his shirt was torn. And this isn't the first time, Mr. Coleman. This has been going on for months." There was a pause on the other end, the sound of papers shuffling. "I see. And do you know who was involved?" "Some boys from his grade. He hasn't told me names, he's scared, but I know he's told teachers before and nothing's happened. Nothing's changed." "I understand your concern, Mrs. Watts," Coleman said, and his voice had that flat, practiced tone, the kind that sounded sympathetic but wasn't really feeling anything at all. "These situations can be tricky. Kids that age, there's a lot of roughhousing, a lot of things that look worse than they are. But I assure you, we take all reports seriously." Denise's grip on the phone tightened. "This isn't roughhousing. My son came home with a torn shirt and a bruised face. He was hiding behind a dumpster crying because he was too scared to walk home a different way." "I hear you," Coleman said, and there was a shuffle again, like he was already looking at something else. "I'll go ahead and note this in his file, and we'll look into it. Talk to some staff, keep an eye on things during passing periods." "Look into it," Denise repeated, the words feeling hollow in her mouth. "That's it?" "We take bullying very seriously here at Jefferson," Coleman said, smooth as ever. "I'll be in touch if we find out anything concrete." The call ended a moment later, some polite closing words Denise barely registered, and she set the phone down on the table slow, like it weighed twice what it should have. She sat there a second, staring at nothing, the sound of Charlie's spoon clinking against his bowl the only noise in the kitchen. She felt it rise up in her chest, something hot and helpless all at once. She'd done the right thing. She'd called. She'd used her voice, and it had landed on nothing. Some man behind a desk who'd probably already forgotten her name by the time he hung up. She glanced at Charlie, who was watching her carefully, his spoon frozen halfway to his mouth. "They gonna do something?" he asked quietly. "They said they'd look into it," Denise said, trying to keep her voice steady, trying not to let the exhaustion and anger leak into it. But Charlie was 11, not stupid, and she watched his face fall a little, like he already knew what that meant. Nothing. It meant nothing. She didn't say anything else. She just got up, rinsed her coffee mug in the sink, and got Charlie ready for the day, the whole time feeling like she'd failed him twice now, once by not seeing it sooner, and once by trying to fix it and getting nowhere at all. By the time her shift ended that afternoon, the feeling hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown heavier, sitting in her stomach like a stone. She sat in the break room, still in her uniform, turning the little worn card over in her fingers, Steel Horizon printed across the top, a phone number below it. She thought about Tank's hands working steady and sure under the hood of her car. She thought about the way Charlie had looked at him, that small flicker of trust in his eyes when nothing else had reached him in months. She picked up her phone and dialed the number before she could talk herself out of it. Tank's phone buzzed on the workbench just as he was tightening the last bolt on a Harley's brake caliper. He wiped his hands on a shop rag and picked it up. And when he saw the name on the screen, he felt something in his chest tighten before he even answered. "Denise," he said, "everything okay?" Her voice came through, tired, thinner than he remembered from the night before. "I called the school this morning, told them what happened to Charlie. The vice principal said they'd look into it." She paused. "That's it? That's all they said? Look into it. Like Charlie's just a note in some file now." Tank set the wrench down slow. "That's all they gave you?" "That's all they ever give anybody," Denise said, and there was something bitter in it now, something worn down by years of hearing the same empty words. "I don't know what else to do, Tank. I called you because I didn't know who else to call. I know that's not fair to put on you." "It's fair," Tank said, and he meant it. "You did the right thing calling me. Let me think on it. I'll call you back tonight." After they hung up, Tank stood there in the shop for a long moment, staring at nothing, same as Denise had that morning. Behind him, the radio was playing some classic rock station low, and the smell of motor oil hung thick in the air, but none of it registered. All he could see was Charlie's face, the bruise on his cheek, the way the boy had flinched when Tank first crouched down beside him behind that dumpster. He thought about marching into that school himself, demanding answers, standing over some vice principal's desk until somebody took it seriously. But he knew how that would look. A man his size, leather cut, tattoos crawling up his forearms, showing up angry at a middle school. That wouldn't help Charlie. That would probably make things worse, give people something else to whisper about, instead of the boys who were actually doing the hurting. He needed another way in. Not through the front door with his fists up, but through the side door. Quiet, patient, the kind of way that actually stuck. He sat down at the little desk in the back of the shop, the one buried under invoices and parts catalogs, and pulled his laptop over. He typed in the name of the school district, then added the word volunteer. Not really sure what he was looking for, just following some kind of gut feeling that told him there had to be something. It took a few minutes of clicking through dry official pages, but then he found it. A flyer posted just 2 weeks ago, bright yellow, and stamped with the district's seal. Urgent. Community volunteers needed for hallway supervision. Due to recent budget cuts, several schools in the district, Jefferson Middle School among them, were short-staffed on hall monitors and lunchroom supervisors. The flyer asked for anyone 18 or older willing to pass a background check to consider signing up. Tank read it twice, then a third time, leaning back in his chair. It wasn't much. It wasn't a guarantee of anything, but it was a way in. A legal, official, doors-wide-open way to be there, in the hallways, where Charlie walked every day scared out of his mind. He printed the flyer out, folded it, and stuck it in his jacket pocket like it was something precious. That night, he called Denise back, told her what he'd found, and told her his plan. She was quiet for a long moment on the other end, and then she said, "You'd really do that? Go volunteer at his school?" "Somebody's got to be there for him," Tank said. "Might as well be me." The next morning, Tank rode his motorcycle straight to Jefferson Middle School instead of opening the shop. He parked in the visitor lot, engine rumbling low before he cut it off, and sat there a second, looking at the building. Red brick, faded a little with age, a flagpole out front with the flag hanging still in the windless morning air. Kids were filing in through the front doors, backpacks slung over shoulders, some laughing, some quiet, none of them paying him much mind yet. He walked up the front steps in his leather cut, patches worn soft from years on the road, boots heavy against the concrete. Inside, the front office was small and bright, fluorescent lights humming overhead, a counter separating visitors from the desks behind it. The secretary, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, looked up from her computer as the door opened. Her eyes went wide, and she visibly startled, her hand jumping to her chest. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice a little higher than it had been a second ago. Tank pulled the folded flyer from his jacket pocket and set it on the counter, smoothing it out with one big hand. "I'm here about the volunteer program," he said. "I'd like to sign up." The secretary blinked at him, then down at the flyer, then back up at him again, like she was trying to figure out if this was some kind of joke. When she saw he was serious, she reached under the counter, pulled out a clipboard with a stack of forms attached, and slid it across to him without a word. Tank picked up the pen, chained to the clipboard, and sat down in one of the plastic chairs by the window, filling out the application slow and careful, printing his name in block letters at the top. Tank Morrison. He answered every question honestly, didn't hide a thing. Not his record from 20 years back, not his current job, not his club affiliation. If they were going to say no to him, they were going to say no to the truth. The school board met that Thursday evening in a room that smelled like old coffee and floor wax. Fold-out tables had been pushed together at the front, and 5 board members sat behind them, papers stacked neat in front of each one. A handful of folding chairs faced them, mostly empty except for Principal Reyes, who sat in the front row with a folder clutched tight in both hands, and Tank, who sat 2 chairs down from him, his big frame looking almost too large for the plastic seat beneath him. He'd worn his cleanest jeans and a button-up shirt over a plain white tee, but he hadn't taken off his leather cut. It felt wrong to hide who he was, even here, even now. The board chair, a thin woman with silver hair pulled back tight, cleared her throat and looked down at the paper in front of her. "We're here tonight for an expedited review of a volunteer application. Mr. Tank Morrison, for hallway and lunchroom supervision at Jefferson Middle School." She looked up, and her eyes moved over him slow, taking in the patches, the tattoos on his forearms, the silver in his beard. "Principal Reyes, you requested this review be moved up. Care to explain why?" Reyes stood, smoothing his tie with one nervous hand. "Yes, thank you." His voice wobbled just slightly before he caught it. "As you all know, the budget cuts left us short 4 hallway monitors and 2 lunchroom supervisors this semester. We've had 3 incidents in the last month alone that likely wouldn't have happened with proper supervision. I don't have to remind anyone what happened with the Denton boys' fight in the East hallway, or the incident in the boys' locker room last week." He glanced at Tank, then back to the board. "We need bodies in those hallways. Mr. Morrison passed his background check. His record from 20 years ago was for a bar fight, nothing since, and he's been forthcoming about every part of his history. I'm asking the board to approve him." One of the board members, a heavy-set man with wire glasses, leaned forward. "Forthcoming or not, Principal Reyes, this is a Hell's Angel we're talking about. Do we really want that image in our hallways? Parents are going to have questions." "Parents already have questions about why their kids aren't safe," Reyes said, and for the first time his voice held something steady in it. "I'd rather answer questions about a volunteer's leather vest than questions about why nobody was there when a kid got hurt." The room went quiet a moment. Tank kept his hands folded in his lap, kept his eyes down, respectful, like his uncle had taught him years ago. Don't argue with folks who are scared. Let the truth sit there and do its own work. The silver-haired chair looked at him directly. "Mr. Morrison, anything you'd like to say?" Tank stood slow, careful not to make any sudden movements. "Just that I've got no interest in trouble," he said. "I run a shop, I fix bikes, I go to work, I go home. But there's a boy at that school who's scared to walk the halls, and I figure if grown folks are willing to stand there and make sure kids are safe, it shouldn't matter what patch is on their jacket." He paused. "That's all I got." The board members exchanged looks. Papers shuffled. Finally, the chair spoke again. "All in favor of approving Mr. Morrison's volunteer application, effective this coming Monday?" 3 hands went up slow. 2 stayed down. The motion passed, 3-2, narrow as a hallway crack. But it passed. Tank didn't smile in the room. He waited until he was back outside in the parking lot, standing beside his bike under the orange glow of a street lamp, before he pulled out his phone and called Denise. "They said yes," he told her, and he could hear her breath catch on the other end. "Tank, really? They approved you?" "Monday morning," he said. "I'll be there." There was a shuffling sound, and then Denise's voice went a little farther away, like she'd pulled the phone from her ear. "Charlie, come here. Come listen to this." A pause, then closer again, her voice warm now. "He's right here. Say hi to Tank, baby." There was quiet on the line, and then Charlie's small voice came through, careful, like he wasn't sure it was real. "You're really coming to my school?" "Every day," Tank said. "Starting Monday." And through the phone, faint but unmistakable, Tank heard it. Charlie laughed, just a little, just enough. It was the first time Tank had heard that sound. Monday morning came gray and cool, with a thin mist still clinging to the parking lot when Tank pulled his truck in at 7:15. He'd left the bike at home. Some things you saved for after Trust was built. And rolling up on a Harley in front of a middle school on his first day felt like pushing his luck. He'd worn his vest anyway. Couldn't bring himself not to. The building sat low and long, brick the color of old rust, with a flagpole out front, and a sign that read, "Jefferson Middle School, home of the Wildcats," in faded blue letters. Kids were already streaming in through the double doors, backpacks slung over shoulders, breath fogging in the cold air. A line of cars idled at the curb, parents leaning across seats to kiss foreheads before their kids darted out. Tank got out of his truck, and the first thing he noticed was how the sound changed around him. Not loud, just quieter. A mother buckling her daughter's backpack strap glanced up and went still, her hand pausing mid-motion. 2 boys near the flagpole stopped talking and stared, mouths half open. A girl tugged on her friend's sleeve and pointed, not bothering to be subtle about it. Tank kept his eyes forward, and his walk steady. He'd learned a long time ago that the worst thing you could do was shrink. Shrinking made people think you had something to be ashamed of. So he walked tall, shoulders back, boots hitting the pavement with a slow, even rhythm. And he made himself look calm, even though his stomach had a few knots in it that he wasn't about to admit to anyone. Near the entrance, a cluster of parents stood together, coffee cups in hand, and one woman in a sharp blazer leaned toward another and whispered something behind her hand. Tank didn't need to hear the words to know what she was saying. He'd heard versions of it his whole life. Look at him. Can you believe they let him in here? He kept walking. Principal Reyes met him just inside the doors, looking like he hadn't slept much, his tie already a little crooked. "Morning, Tank," he said, sticking out a hand. "Glad you're here." "Morning." Tank shook it firm. "I'll walk you down to the front office, get you your visitor badge, and then I'll show you your post. East hallway and the cafeteria during lunch. That work?" "Wherever you need me." They walked together down a hallway lined with lockers and construction paper artwork taped to the walls, past a trophy case with a cracked pane of glass, past a bulletin board covered in flyers for a canned food drive. Kids parted around them like water around a rock, some staring outright, some sneaking glances and looking away fast when Tank caught their eye. A boy near a water fountain froze mid-drink, water dribbling down his chin, just watching. Tank gave him a small nod. The boy blinked, then nodded back, unsure, before hurrying off. At the front office, a secretary with reading glasses perched on her nose looked up, and her eyes went wide for just a second before she caught herself and reached for a laminated badge on a lanyard. "Here you go, Mr. Morrison," she said, her voice a touch too bright, the kind of bright that came from nerves. "Just, wear this at all times while you're on campus." "Will do." Tank clipped it to his vest, right next to the patch that said Steel Horizon. Reyes led him back out into the hallway, which was filling up now, the morning bell close. "I'll leave you to it," he said. "Anything comes up, my office is right there. And Tank." He paused. "Thank you. Really?" Tank just nodded, and Reyes disappeared back toward his office, leaving him standing there in the middle of the hallway, kids flowing past him on both sides like he was a boulder in a stream. That was when he saw him. Charlie was down at the far end of the hallway, standing at his locker, alone. His shoulders were hunched up near his ears, his backpack clutched against his chest instead of on his back, and he kept glancing sideways like he was waiting for something bad to happen. His eyes were darting, scanning the crowd, not settling anywhere. Tank caught his eye across the length of the hallway. He didn't wave, didn't call out, just gave him a small nod, steady and sure, the same kind of nod he'd give a brother across a barroom. Charlie's shoulders dropped, just an inch, just enough. A few feet away, leaning against a bank of lockers with two other boys, Marcus Ellery watched the whole thing happen, his eyes narrowing, arms crossed tight over his chest. The pickup line at Jefferson Middle School stretched half a block by the time the final bell rang, minivans and sedans idling bumper to bumper along the curb. Carol Ann Whitfield stood near the crosswalk in her pressed khakis and cardigan, sunglasses pushed up into her blonde hair, phone in hand. She wasn't looking at her phone, though. She was looking at the school doors. "Did you see him this morning?" she said to the woman next to her, a thin, nervous mom named Patty Suggs, who always seemed to agree with whatever Carol Ann said first. "Just walking right in like he owns the place, leather vest and all, tattoos up his neck." "I saw him," Patty said, hugging her cardigan tighter, even though the afternoon wasn't cold. "My Ben said the teachers just let him wander the halls. No badge check, nothing." "He has a badge," said another mother, a heavy-set woman named Rhonda, who was leaning against her minivan with her arms crossed. "I checked with the front office." "A badge doesn't tell you what's in a man's heart," Carol Ann said, and she said it the way she said most things, like she was quoting something off a greeting card. "I heard he's in some kind of motorcycle gang, the Hells Angels or something." "Isn't that the one that's, you know?" Patty lowered her voice like the word itself was dangerous. "Criminal?" I don't know what he is, Carol Ann said. And that's exactly my point. Nobody knows. Reyes just let him in because the school's short-staffed. But shouldn't there be some kind of background check? Some kind of vote? I'm the PTA president and nobody consulted me. Rhonda shifted her weight. My daughter said he was nice, said he knew her name by lunchtime. That's exactly what worries me, Carol Ann said, snapping her sunglasses down over her eyes like she was ending the conversation, though she clearly wasn't. Men like that, they know how to make themselves likable. That's how they get close to people. A few more parents had drifted into the little cluster now, drawn the way people always are toward a conversation that sounds important. Carol Ann felt the eyes on her and straightened her spine a little, warming to her audience. I think, she said, we owe it to our kids to ask some hard questions. Who approved this? What's his background? Why does a public school need a biker in the hallways when we pay taxes for security? So what do we do? Patty asked, eyes wide, eager for direction. Carol Ann pulled her phone back down from where she'd tucked it and opened up a blank note. I'm going to start a petition, she said. Get it in front of the board before this goes any further. We'll ask for his removal from the volunteer program until there's a proper review. That's not unreasonable. That's just being responsible parents. A murmur of agreement rippled through the little knot of parents, heads nodding, arms crossing tighter against the cold. Inside the building, none of that had reached Charlie yet, or Tank either. The hallway had mostly cleared out, lockers slamming shut one after another as the last stragglers grabbed jackets and headed for the buses. Tank walked beside Charlie, matching his pace to the boy's shorter stride, past the trophy case and the bulletin board with its crooked flyers. You did good today, Tank said. Charlie glanced up at him, surprised, like he hadn't expected anyone to say that to him. Maybe ever. I didn't really do anything. You went to all your classes. You ate lunch in the cafeteria instead of hiding in the bathroom. Tank kept his voice easy, like he was just stating facts, not making a big deal out of it. That's something. They reached the front doors, glass fogged a little from the change in temperature, and pushed out into the gray afternoon light. A line of cars waited at the curb, and Charlie's eyes scanned until he spotted an old blue sedan with a dented fender pulling up near the front. That's my mom, he said. Denise got out of the car, tired lines under her eyes but her face brightening the second she saw Charlie. Then she noticed the tall man in the leather vest walking beside her son, and her steps slowed just slightly. Tank stuck out his hand before she could say anything. Mrs. Watts, Tank Morrison, I'm volunteering here in the hallways this year. His voice was steady, gentle, nothing like what his size might have suggested. Wanted to introduce myself properly since we talked on the phone but never met face to face. Denise took his hand, her grip hesitant at first, then firmer. Denise, she said. Thank you. For everything. Her eyes flicked to Charlie, who stood a little straighter than he had that morning, and something in her chest loosened just slightly. 2 weeks passed, and Tank became part of the school's rhythm the way an old clock becomes part of a house. You stop noticing the ticking. You just know it's there. He arrived every morning at 7:45, parking his motorcycle in the far corner of the lot where Principal Reyes had cleared a spot just for him. He'd walk in through the front doors, nod at the secretary, who no longer gasped at the sight of him, and take up his post near the trophy case where the main hallway split into 3 directions. He learned names fast. Not just Charlie's. There was Ben Suggs, who always dropped his books by the water fountain. There was a quiet girl named Ava who ate lunch alone until Tank started asking her about the horse drawings on her folder. There was a kid named Deshawn who stuttered when he talked to teachers but never stuttered around Tank. Not once. Not from the first week. Morning, Deshawn. Morning, Mr. Morrison. You can call me Tank. Okay, T-Tank. Small things, but small things added up. The way pennies fill a jar. On a Wednesday, there was trouble in the cafeteria. 2 7th graders, red-faced and loud, shoved each other near the tray return, one accusing the other of cutting the lunch line. Trays clattered. A group of kids backed away, phones already coming up to record. A teacher's aide near the doors froze, unsure what to do. Tank was there before anyone else moved. He didn't grab either boy. He didn't raise his voice. He just stepped between them, big as a door, and said in a low, even tone, "Hey now, look at me." Both boys looked at him, startled out of their anger for just long enough. "Nobody's cutting anybody today," Tank said. "You're both going to back up, get your trays, and sit down. We'll sort out the line thing after you eat something. Nobody thinks straight when they're hungry." It was such a strange, calm thing to say that both boys actually laughed, a little embarrassed, and the tension broke like a held breath let out. They backed away from each other. Trays were retrieved. The cafeteria noise swelled back up to its normal roar within a minute, like nothing had happened at all. Reyes, watching from the doorway, let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. Every day, Tank checked in on Charlie. Sometimes it was just a nod in the hallway. Sometimes it was walking him to his locker, listening while Charlie talked about nothing in particular. Homework, a video game, a kid in gym class who could do a backflip. Slowly, Charlie's shoulders came down from around his ears. Slowly, he stopped flinching when someone laughed loudly near him. One afternoon, Tank found the 3rd hallway locker sticking, its hinge squeaking every time a student yanked it open. He knelt down with a small wrench from his jacket pocket, the same kind he used on bike parts at the shop, and showed Charlie, who happened to be walking by, how to loosen the hinge screw just enough to stop the squeak without making the door loose. "See that?" Tank said, holding up the wrench. "Sometimes things don't need fixing all the way, just enough to stop the noise." Charlie watched close, quiet, filing it away. Then came Thursday. In science class, Mrs. Halloway asked the room what force was responsible for keeping planets in orbit. Hands went up, the same 3 or 4 hands that always went up. Charlie sat in the back, like always, eyes down on his notebook. But something in him shifted. Maybe it was the wrench trick. Maybe it was 2 weeks of a steady, calm presence in the hallway who remembered his name every single day. Whatever it was, Charlie felt his hand rise before he fully decided to raise it. "Charlie?" Mrs. Halloway said, surprised, since Charlie hadn't spoken up in class since September. "Gravity," Charlie said. His voice came out steadier than he expected. "That's exactly right." Charlie sat a little taller in his seat, feeling something warm and unfamiliar bloom in his chest. That afternoon, he found Tank by the trophy case as the last bell rang. Tank, look." Charlie pulled a small wrench from his backpack, one he'd borrowed from his mom's toolbox at home, and held it up. "I fixed the hinge on my closet door at home. Did it just like you showed me? Just enough, not too much." Tank crouched down to look at it, his face breaking into a wide, genuine grin. "Yeah? Let me see how you held it." Charlie showed him, gripping the wrench the way Tank had, turning his wrist just so. "That's exactly right," Tank said, echoing Mrs. Halloway without knowing it, and Charlie beamed like he'd won something bigger than a spelling bee. Friday came gray and cold, the kind of morning where the sky couldn't decide if it wanted to rain. Tank rolled into the parking lot a few minutes earlier than usual, his breath fogging in the November air. He'd promised Reyes he'd check the gym hallway during the class changeover, since 2 different teachers had complained about kids loitering by the locker rooms instead of heading to class. He walked the main hall first, nodding at Ava, who held up her folder to show him a new horse drawing, its mane done in careful pencil shading. He told her it looked like the horse was about to run right off the page. She smiled down at her shoes, pleased. Then he turned down toward the gym. The hallway here was quieter, lit by a single flickering fluorescent tube that had needed replacing since September. Most kids were already inside the gym or filing toward their next class. The locker room door was propped half open, the way it always was between periods. That was when Tank heard it. A low sound, muffled, like someone trying hard not to make noise and failing anyway. A choked breath. A thud. Soft, like a shoulder hitting metal. Tank's whole body went still and alert, the way it used to on long night rides when something felt wrong up ahead on the road. He crossed the hallway in 4 long strides and pushed the locker room door open. The smell hit him first, damp towels and old rubber mats. Then he saw them. Marcus Ellery had Charlie backed against a bank of lockers at the far end of the room, one hand fisted in the collar of Charlie's shirt, the other pulled back in a tight fist, cocked and ready. Charlie's face was turned to the side, eyes squeezed shut, both hands raised weakly in front of him, not to fight back, just to shrink smaller. His shoulders shook. "Marcus." Tank's voice came out low, but it filled the whole room like water filling a glass. Marcus froze mid-motion, fist still raised. He turned his head toward Tank, and for 1 second, something flickered across his face that looked almost like relief, gone as fast as it came, replaced by a hard, defiant scowl. "Let go of him," Tank said. He didn't shout it. He didn't need to. He walked forward, slow and steady, the way he'd learned to approach a spooked horse once, years ago, at his uncle's place. Big movements scared things. Slow, sure movements didn't. Marcus's grip on Charlie's collar loosened, then dropped. Charlie slid down an inch against the lockers, catching himself, chest heaving. "Marcus, step back. Now." This time there was an edge in it, not cruel, but firm, the kind of voice that had once talked down 2 grown bikers about to throw punches over a parking spot. Marcus stepped back, fast, like the words had physically pushed him, and that was when Tank saw it. Marcus flinched. Not just stepped back, flinched, his whole body flinching like Tank had raised a hand instead of his voice. His shoulders hunched up around his ears, his eyes went wide and glassy for half a second, and his arms came up instinctively in front of his chest, a small defensive posture that had nothing to do with getting caught, bullying a smaller kid. It was gone as fast as it appeared. Marcus straightened up, jaw tight, eyes hard again, back to looking like a 7th grader who'd just been caught doing something he knew was wrong. But Tank had seen it, and it didn't sit right with him. "Charlie, you okay?" Tank asked, keeping his eyes on Marcus but softening his voice completely for the boy against the lockers. Charlie nodded, still catching his breath, not trusting himself to speak yet. Tank turned back to Marcus. "You're going to walk yourself down to Mrs. Patterson's office, right now. You understand me?" Marcus didn't argue. He grabbed his backpack off the bench without a word, not meeting Tank's eyes, and walked out the locker room door with his head down, shoulders curled inward, looking smaller than a 7th grader built like a football lineman had any right to look. Tank watched him go, that flinch replaying in his mind, sharp and strange and out of place, like a wrong note in a familiar song. Saturday morning, Tank found himself parked outside Jefferson Middle School, even though there was no school that day. He'd called Mrs. Patterson the night before, and she'd agreed to meet him for a few minutes in her office, saying she sometimes came in on weekends to catch up on paperwork when the halls were quiet. The building felt strange without kids in it. Tank's boots echoed down the empty hallway, past the trophy case and the bulletin board with its faded construction paper turkeys left over from a Thanksgiving project. Mrs. Patterson's office door was propped open, a small lamp glowing on her desk instead of the harsh overhead lights. Mr. Morrison, she said, waving him in. Sit, please. Tank folded himself into the small chair across from her desk, feeling too big for it, like always. He didn't waste time getting to the point. That wasn't his way. Yesterday, in the locker room, he said. When I told Marcus to step back, he flinched. Not like a kid caught doing something wrong. Flinched like I was going to hit him. Mrs. Patterson's face didn't change much, but her hands went still on her desk, folding together carefully. I've seen that before, Tank went on. Growing up. Kids at the shop, kids in the club, some of them had that same look. It's not something you learn from getting caught bullying somebody. It's something that gets put into you. Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a moment. She glanced down at a closed file folder on the corner of her desk, then back up at Tank, and he could see the struggle behind her eyes, like a door she wanted to open but couldn't quite bring herself to. Mr. Morrison, you understand I can't share details from a student's file, even with someone I trust. She said it gently, but there was steel in it, too. I'm not asking you to break any rules, Tank said. I just want to know if I'm crazy, if what I saw yesterday means something, or if I'm just an old biker seeing ghosts where there aren't any. Mrs. Patterson pressed her lips together. She looked down at her hands, turned her wedding ring once around her finger, a small, nervous gesture Tank hadn't seen from her before. Marcus has been a student here since 6th grade, she said slowly, choosing each word like she was walking across ice. His behavior changed significantly after his parents' divorce last year. Grades slipped. He got quieter in some classes, angrier in others. That happens with divorce, Tank said. Doesn't explain a flinch like that. No, she agreed softly. It doesn't. She was quiet again, longer this time. Tank waited. He'd learned patience from years of waiting on skittish new members at the clubhouse, waiting for trust to build one day at a time. He didn't push. Finally, Mrs. Patterson spoke, her voice careful, measured, like she was picking her way through a minefield of things she legally could not say directly. Marcus's father is very well respected here at Jefferson, very well liked by the staff. Parents request his classes specifically. Tank frowned. His dad teaches here? Mrs. Patterson nodded, still choosing her words with great care. Mr. Ellery, 7th grade math. Tank sat back in the small chair like he'd been pushed. Ellery, he repeated. I've seen him in the hallway, shakes hands with the school board members, wins that Teacher of the Year thing every couple years. Yes, Mrs. Patterson said, and something tightened around her mouth, something that looked almost like grief. That's him. Tank leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying her face. You're not telling me something. I can't tell you something, she corrected gently. There's a difference. But Mr. Morrison, I would ask you to think about what kind of home life might produce a flinch like the one you saw yesterday, and I would ask you to be very careful and very gentle with Marcus going forward, more than you might have planned to be. Tank sat with that for a long moment, the office quiet except for the hum of the old radiator in the corner. He thought about the scowl on Marcus's face, hard and defiant, a mask over something else entirely. He thought about the flinch, quick and involuntary, the kind of thing a body learned to do without permission. He's not the bully, Tank said quietly, more to himself than to her. He's a kid who got taught how to be one. Mrs. Patterson didn't answer that directly. She only looked at him, her eyes tired and sad, and let the silence speak for her. Monday morning, Tank took his post by the 7th grade lockers with new eyes. He'd always watched the hallway the way he used to watch traffic on a long ride, staying loose, staying ready, but not looking for anything in particular. Now he was looking for one thing. Mr. Ellery. The man was easy to spot. Tall, trim, wearing pressed khakis and a tucked-in polo like he was still auditioning for a catalog photo. He had a smile that came out easy for the office staff, for the other teachers, for the parents who stopped him in the hall to shake his hand. Tank had seen that smile plenty of times before Saturday. He'd thought nothing of it. Now he watched Mr. Ellery's face change the second Marcus came into view. It happened outside room 1-14, first period. Marcus was late, backpack half-zipped, hair messy like he'd rolled straight out of bed. Mr. Ellery stood in the doorway, and when he spotted his son, something flickered across his face, quick as a shadow passing over water. Gone almost before Tank could name it. But he'd seen it. Cold. Flat. Like looking at a stranger who'd disappointed him just by existing. "You're late," Mr. Ellery said, voice clipped. Not loud. Not the kind of thing that would draw attention from anybody walking by. Just sharp enough to cut. "Sorry, Dad, I couldn't find my... Get inside." Mr. Ellery didn't even look at him when he said it. He was already turning to greet another student, some kid named Ashley, and his voice went warm again, easy again, like a light switch flipping. Tank filed that away. Tuesday, he watched it happen again. This time in the cafeteria during lunch duty, when Mr. Ellery came through to grab something from the teacher's lounge. He passed a table of students, ruffled a boy's hair, laughed at somebody's joke, moved through the room like sunshine. Then his eyes landed on Marcus, sitting alone at the end of a table, picking at a tray of food he wasn't eating. "Sit up straight," Mr. Ellery said, not breaking stride. "You look like a slob." Marcus straightened so fast his fork clattered off the tray. Mr. Ellery didn't even look back to see if he'd done it. He was already gone, already smiling at somebody else, already back to being the man everybody loved. Wednesday, Tank caught him in the hallway correcting Marcus's shirt, tucking it in himself with a rough tug, muttering something too quiet to hear but clearly not kind, based on the way Marcus's shoulders curled inward like he was trying to disappear. Tank started to understand the shape of it. Small things. Quiet things. The kind of cruelty that never left a mark you could point to, never gave anybody a reason to step in. Just 1,000 small cuts, day after day, wearing a kid down until he learned there was only one way to feel any power at all. Take it from somebody smaller. Thursday afternoon, school let out at 3:15, and Tank was walking to his bike in the side lot when he heard voices raised near the teacher's parking area. He slowed, boots quiet on the asphalt, and looked over. Mr. Ellery stood beside his car, a folded paper in his hand, and Marcus stood in front of him, head down, backpack straps gripped tight in both fists. "A C-," Mr. Ellery said, voice low and furious, shaking the paper like it had personally offended him. "You embarrass me. Do you understand that? My own son, sitting in Mrs. Grant's class, pulling a C- like some kind of idiot." "I tried, you didn't try hard enough. That's the problem with you. You never try hard enough. You're soft, Marcus. Weak. You think the world's going to hand you anything because you feel sorry for yourself?" Marcus said nothing. His shoulders had gone rigid, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed somewhere on the pavement like he was trying to disappear into it. Tank stood frozen by his bike, one hand still on the handlebar, and felt something cold settle low in his stomach. He'd heard those words before. Not from Mr. Ellery. From Marcus. Soft. Weak. Feel sorry for yourself. The exact same words Marcus had thrown at Charlie in the locker room, sharp and cruel, delivered with the same flat certainty Tank was hearing now in the parking lot. He understood then, all at once, like a door swinging open. Marcus wasn't inventing his cruelty. He was returning it. The only way he knew how. Friday afternoon, Mrs. Patterson's office smelled like coffee and the lemon candy she kept in a jar on her desk. Tank stood near the window, arms crossed, trying to look smaller than he was. It never quite worked, but he tried anyway. "You sure about this?" Mrs. Patterson asked quietly, glancing at the door. Both boys agreed, but agreeing and being ready are two different things. "I know," Tank said. "That's why I'm here." The door opened. Charlie came in first, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, eyes darting toward Marcus the second he saw him sitting in the far chair. His whole body went stiff, like a rabbit deciding whether to run. Marcus didn't look much better. He sat hunched forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the carpet like it held answers. He didn't look up when Charlie walked in. He didn't look up at all. "Nobody has to talk if they don't want to," Mrs. Patterson said gently, taking the seat behind her desk. "This is just a chance to sit together. That's all." Charlie lowered himself into the chair farthest from Marcus, knees pressed together, shoulders curled in. The silence stretched long and uncomfortable, the kind of quiet that made the ticking of the wall clock sound loud as a drum. Tank pulled a chair from the corner and sat down between the boys, close enough that neither of them was really alone. "I'm going to tell you both something," Tank said. "Something I don't tell people much." Charlie's eyes flicked up. Marcus's did too, just barely. "When I was about your age," Tank said, "I was skinny. Skinnier than either of you. Knees like a bird, arms like sticks. And I had a stutter." He let that sit a second. Charlie blinked, surprised. "Bad one," Tank went on. "Couldn't get through a sentence without getting stuck on a word, sometimes for 10, 15 seconds. Kids at my school figured that out fast. Called me Tank the Stammer. Real original bunch." Marcus's eyes stayed on him now. Steady. "They'd wait for me by the buses," Tank said. "Corner me, ask me questions just to watch me struggle to answer. Made me say my own name in front of everybody once, just to laugh. I used to walk home the long way, through the ditch behind the water tower, just so I wouldn't have to pass them." "What did you do?" Charlie asked, voice small. "Nothing. For a long time. Just took it. Figured that's what I deserved somehow. Figured something was wrong with me." Tank rubbed a hand over his jaw. "Then my Uncle Ray noticed. Big guy, rode with a club outside Tulsa. Scared half the neighborhood just walking into a room. He caught me hiding in the garage one day, crying so hard I couldn't breathe." Marcus was very still now, watching Tank like he was the only person in the room. "Ray didn't tell me to toughen up," Tank said. "Didn't tell me to fight back or stop being a baby. He just sat down next to me on the garage floor and said, 'Tell me who did this.' And then he listened. Really listened. First time anybody had." Tank looked at his hands. "He started taking me to the shop with him after school. Taught me how to work on bikes. Told me I was smart, that my stutter didn't mean nothing about my worth. First time in my life somebody made me feel like I belonged somewhere. That's the whole reason I ended up where I am now. Because one rough old biker decided a scared kid was worth his time." The room was quiet. Charlie's eyes had gone glassy. Marcus's jaw was working, like he was chewing on something he didn't want to say. "Marcus," Mrs. Patterson said softly, "you don't have to. But if you want to." Marcus's hands twisted in his lap. When he spoke, his voice came out cracked and small, nothing like the voice he used in the locker room. "My dad calls me weak," he said. "Every day. Says I embarrass him. Says I'm soft." His breath hitched. I wanted somebody to feel small, too, so it wasn't just me." Tears slid down his face before he could stop them, and he swiped at them angrily, like he was furious at his own body for betraying him. Charlie sat frozen a moment, something shifting behind his eyes. The fear was still there, but something else had crowded in beside it now. Something softer. "I didn't know," Charlie said quietly. Monday morning, the cafeteria buzzed with its usual noise. Trays clattered. Somebody's chair scraped too loud against the floor. Kids shouted across tables about weekend video games and homework nobody had finished. Tank stood near the double doors, coffee cup in hand, doing his usual sweep of the room. He'd learned the rhythm of this place by now. The kids who sat alone. The kids who laughed too hard to cover something else. The tables where trouble sometimes brewed. His eyes landed on a table near the window. Charlie sat with his tray, picking at a pile of fries. And across from him, hunched over his own lunch, sat Marcus. Tank almost dropped his coffee. He didn't say anything. Didn't walk over. Didn't do anything that might make either boy feel watched. He just leaned against the wall a little straighter and let himself notice. "You gonna eat that whole thing?" Marcus asked, nodding at Charlie's tray. Charlie glanced up, startled, like he wasn't sure the question was really meant for him. "I mean, yeah, probably." "Huh," Marcus said. He looked back down at his own tray. "I hate the pizza here. Tastes like cardboard." "It's not that bad," Charlie said quietly. Then, after a second, "Okay, it's pretty bad." A small silence followed. Not the heavy, terrified kind from Mrs. Patterson's office last Friday. Just an ordinary, awkward silence, the kind that happens between two people who don't know each other very well yet. "You like bikes?" Marcus asked suddenly. "I heard you've been going to that shop, with the biker guy." Charlie's shoulders tensed for half a second, like he expected the question to turn into something else, something sharper. But Marcus's voice wasn't mean, just curious. "Yeah," Charlie said. "Tank's been teaching me stuff. How to change oil, how the engine parts fit together." "That's cool," Marcus said, and he sounded like he meant it. They didn't say much else. But when the bell rang and kids scattered from their tables, dumping trays and grabbing backpacks, Charlie and Marcus walked out of the cafeteria in the same direction, a few feet apart. Neither one saying anything, but neither one walking away either. Tank watched them go, and something in his chest loosened, a knot he hadn't realized he'd been carrying for weeks. That evening, Denise stood outside a small ranch house on Miller Street, her hand hovering over the doorbell. She'd almost turned back to her car twice already. Sandy, one of the club's wives, had invited her the week before, catching her in the school parking lot with a warm smile and a piece of paper with an address scrawled on it. "Come by Thursday," she'd said. "Nothing fancy, just us." Denise didn't know what just us meant. She pictured leather vests and loud motorcycles lined up in the driveway. Instead, she found a quiet street, a porch light glowing yellow, and the smell of something baking drifting out from an open window. She rang the bell. Sandy opened the door, wearing an apron dusted with flour, and pulled Denise into a hug before she could even say hello. "You made it! Come in, come in! Everybody's already fighting over the banana bread." Inside, the living room was full of women. Some Denise recognized vaguely from school pickup lines. Others she'd never seen before. They sat on couches and folding chairs, plates balanced on their knees, laughing at something someone had said before Denise walked in. "This is Denise," Sandy announced. "Charlie's mom." A woman with silver hair and kind eyes stood up first. "Oh, we've heard so much about your boy. Tank talks about him like he's his own." Another woman, younger, with a baby on her hip, spoke up. "I run a meal train for families who need it. I'll add you to the list. No arguments." "I fixed my own transmission last year," said a heavy-set woman near the window, grinning. "I can take a look at your car whenever you need. No charge." I babysit, said another. Anytime. Seriously, anytime. Denise stood frozen in the doorway, plate untouched, words caught somewhere in her throat. She'd spent so long doing everything alone, stacking 2 jobs and a broken car and a struggling son on her own shoulders, convinced that asking for help meant failing somehow. Nobody here seemed to think that. I don't know what to say, Denise finally managed, her voice cracking. Sandy squeezed her shoulder. You don't have to say anything, honey. Just sit down and eat some banana bread. Denise sat. And somewhere between the laughter and the plates being passed and the warmth filling the little living room, the tears came, quiet and unstoppable, rolling down her cheeks as she realized, for the first time in years, she wasn't carrying this alone. The gymnasium at Jefferson Middle School had been transformed. Someone had hung streamers from the basketball hoops. Folding tables lined the walls, covered in casseroles and cookies, and a big banner that read Community Appreciation Day in letters cut from construction paper. Tank felt out of place, standing under all that cheerful paper. But he stayed anyway, because Charlie had asked him to come. He found Charlie near the drink table, bouncing on his toes with the kind of energy that used to be buried so deep under fear that Tank had almost forgotten what it looked like. Tank! Charlie waved him over, grabbing his sleeve before he'd even finished crossing the room. Come meet everybody. A cluster of kids stood nearby, some Tank recognized from the hallways, others new faces. Charlie pulled him right into the middle of them, like he was showing off a trophy. This is Tank, Charlie announced, chest puffed out just slightly. He's my friend. The words landed soft and simple, but Tank felt them hit somewhere deep in his chest. Not the volunteer, not the biker guy. Friend. Whoa, are those real tattoos? One boy asked, eyes wide. Every one of them, Tank said, crouching down so he wasn't towering over the kid. You want to know what this one means? He pointed to the wolf on his forearm. The boy nodded eagerly, and for a few minutes, Tank found himself surrounded by a small crowd of sticky-fingered kids asking about motorcycles and tattoos and whether he'd ever been in a real fight, which he answered honestly and carefully, the way he answered everything with kids these days. Marcus stood a little behind Charlie, quieter than the rest. But there, he wasn't hiding in the back like he used to. He wasn't scowling either. Just standing, comfortable, like he belonged in the circle. You still doing the counseling thing? Tank asked him quietly, while Charlie got distracted showing another kid the calluses on his hands from turning wrenches. Marcus nodded. Every Tuesday, Mrs. Patterson says I'm doing good. He paused, kicking at the gym floor with his sneaker. My dad even came to one, last week. Tank raised an eyebrow, surprised. Yeah? He didn't say much, Marcus admitted. But he came. Tank put a hand on the boy's shoulder, steady and warm. That's a start, kid. That's a real start. Marcus almost smiled. The rest of the afternoon rolled on easy and bright, full of punch and cookies and parents chatting in clusters, kids running between tables, the whole gymnasium humming with something that felt, for once, like peace. That evening, the smell of pizza filled Steel Horizon shop, mixing with the usual scent of oil and metal. Tank had pushed a workbench to the side to make room for a folding table, and now Charlie and Marcus sat across from each other, arguing cheerfully about which pizza topping was superior, while Denise sat beside Tank, laughing harder than he'd seen her laugh in weeks. Pepperoni is just correct, Charlie was saying, waving a slice for emphasis. It's science. It's boring, Marcus shot back. Sausage has more flavor. You're both wrong, Denise said, grabbing a slice of the veggie pizza nobody else had touched. This is the best one, Charlie made a face. Mom, that's basically salad. Denise threw a napkin at him, and Charlie ducked, laughing, and Tank leaned back in his chair, watching the whole scene with a warmth settling deep in his chest. This was what he'd wanted. Not thanks, not recognition, just this. Two boys who used to flinch around each other, now bickering about pizza toppings like it was the most important thing in the world. His phone rang, buzzing against the workbench. He almost let it go to voicemail, not wanting to break the moment, but he saw the name on the screen. Principal Reyes. Tank frowned and picked up. Reyes? Everything all right? The principal's voice came through tight, rushed, none of its usual calm. Tank, I need you to sit down for this. Tank felt his stomach drop, the warmth from a moment ago draining fast. Across the table, Denise noticed the change in his face and stopped laughing, her eyes locking onto his. Carol Ann Whitfield's petition, Reyes said. It's gotten enough signatures. The board's calling an emergency meeting. They're reconsidering the volunteer program, reconsidering you. Tank's grip tightened around the phone. Charlie had gone quiet too now, sensing something wrong, his slice of pizza forgotten halfway to his mouth. When's the meeting? Tank asked, his voice steady but low. Friday night, Reyes said. Tank, I'll do what I can, but I won't lie to you. It's not looking good. The morning was cold enough that Tank's breath fogged in front of him as he pulled into the school parking lot. He'd barely cut the engine on his bike before he saw Principal Reyes standing by the front doors, arms crossed tight against his chest, not moving even as a light drizzle started to fall. That wasn't a good sign. Reyes never waited outside. He was always buried in paperwork by this hour, buried so deep Tank sometimes had to knock twice just to get his attention. Tank swung his leg off the bike and walked over, boots splashing through a shallow puddle. Reyes, you're gonna catch a cold standing out here. Reyes didn't smile. His face looked gray, tired in a way that went past just needing coffee. Tank, we need to talk. Now, before you head inside. Something in his tone made Tank's stomach tighten. What happened? Reyes glanced back toward the school, like he was checking to make sure no one was listening, then lowered his voice. Mr. Ellery filed a formal complaint against you last night, with the district office. He's saying you overstepped, that you had no right getting involved in his and Marcus's private family matters. Tank's jaw tightened. I never went to him directly. Mrs. Patterson was the one who talked to me, and even then she barely said anything. Just enough for me to understand what Marcus was dealing with. I know, Reyes said quickly. I know that. But Ellery says he found out Patterson discussed his parenting with an outside volunteer. He's furious, Tank. Humiliated, from what I can tell. And humiliated people don't always think straight. He's threatening legal action against the district. Says you had no business getting that close to his son's personal life. Tank felt his hands curl into fists at his sides before he even realized it, and he forced them open again, taking a slow breath. He thought of Marcus at the pizza table just last night, kicking his sneaker against the floor, saying quietly that his dad had shown up to counseling. That had felt like progress. Real progress. And now this. He came to counseling, Reyes, Tank said, his voice low. Marcus told me himself, just last week. That's not overstepping. That's the whole reason any of this mattered in the first place. I believe you, Reyes said, and he sounded like he meant it. But belief isn't going to matter much at the board meeting Friday if there's a legal complaint sitting on the table. The district's lawyers are already looking at it, and until this gets settled... He trailed off, and Tank felt the words coming before Reyes even said them, like a truck he could see barreling toward him, but couldn't step out of the way of in time. Until this gets settled, Reyes continued, quieter now, I need you to suspend your volunteer duties, effective today. The drizzle kept falling, soft and steady, dotting Tank's leather vest with tiny dark spots. For a moment he didn't say anything at all. He just stood there, looking at the school doors, thinking about all the mornings he'd walked through them, nodding at kids by name, kneeling down to tie a shoelace, breaking up shoving matches with nothing but a calm voice and steady eyes. "Charlie's inside," Tank said finally. "He's expecting me to walk him to class." Reyes's face crumpled with something like real grief. "I know. I'm sorry, Tank. I truly am. This isn't what I want, but my hands are tied until the board makes a decision." Tank nodded slowly, though nothing about this felt like agreement. It felt like the ground shifting under him, like something solid crumbling away piece by piece. He thought about Charlie's face last night, lit up and grinning, calling him friend in front of a whole circle of kids. He thought about how easily all of that could be undone by one man's wounded pride and a lawyer's letter. Without another word, Tank turned and walked back toward his bike. Each step across the wet pavement felt heavier than the last. He didn't look back at the school doors, didn't trust himself to see them and not turn around and march back inside anyway, complaint or no complaint. He climbed onto his bike, gripped the handlebars, and sat there for a long moment before starting the engine, the rain soaking through his shoulders, the weight of what he was leaving behind pressing down on his chest like a stone. The days after Tank stopped coming felt long to Charlie, longer than any days had felt in months. He noticed it first in the hallway between first and second period, that stretch of gray tile where Tank used to stand every morning, arms crossed, nodding at kids as they passed. Now there was just Mrs. Patterson, doing her best, but she couldn't be everywhere at once. She had a whole school to watch, not just one boy. Charlie kept his head down again. He didn't mean to. It just happened. The way his shoulders curled in and his eyes dropped to the floor, like his body remembered how to be small before his brain even caught up. He told himself it was fine. He told himself Tank would be back soon, that it was just a mix-up, some grown-up problem that would get fixed the way grown-up problems sometimes did. But the days kept passing, and Tank didn't come back. Marcus noticed the change in Charlie before Charlie even said anything about it. They still sat together at lunch, at first, still talked a little, mostly about nothing, the kind of small talk that had started to feel almost normal between them. But then Marcus started showing up late, sliding into the seat across from Charlie with his eyes down, answering questions in short, clipped words like he was in a hurry to be done talking. "You okay?" Charlie asked him one day, quiet, careful, like the words might break something if he said them too loud. Marcus shrugged. "Yeah, just tired." But Charlie could see it wasn't just tired. There was a new tightness around Marcus's eyes, a flinch in his shoulders whenever a teacher raised their voice too sharp in the hallway. Charlie recognized it because he used to carry it too. Before Tank? Before any of this had started to feel different. He didn't know what had happened at Marcus's house since his dad found out about the counseling, but he could guess it wasn't good. By the end of the week, Marcus stopped sitting with him at lunch altogether. He didn't say why. He just wasn't there anymore, off at a different table with kids Charlie didn't know, keeping his head down the same way Charlie was learning to keep his. Charlie tried not to let it hurt. He told himself Marcus had his own stuff going on, that it wasn't about him, but it felt the same as before, that same hollow feeling of being alone in a hallway full of people, and without Tank there to walk beside him. The fear that had started creeping back in grew a little bigger every single day. By Thursday morning, it had grown too big to hold. Denise pulled the car up to the curb in front of Jefferson Middle School, same as she did every morning, the engine idling rough the way it always did in the cold. She reached over to grab her travel mug of coffee, already thinking about the drive to her first job, when she noticed Charlie hadn't moved to unbuckle his seatbelt. "Charlie? Baby, you're gonna be late." He didn't answer. His hands were pressed flat against his knees, and his shoulders had started to shake, small tremors that grew bigger the longer she watched. "Charlie?" "I can't," he said, his voice breaking apart in the middle of the word. "I can't go back in there." Denise felt her stomach drop straight through the floor of the car. Hey, look at me. What's wrong? What happened?" But Charlie couldn't answer. Not really. Not in words that made sense. He just shook his head over and over, tears streaming down his face, his breath coming in short, broken gasps between sobs. "Please," he finally managed, his voice small and cracked, and so painfully familiar that it took Denise back to another morning months ago, a memory she'd tried hard to forget. "Please don't make me go back. Tank's not there anymore. Nobody's there anymore." Denise reached for him, pulling him into her arms as best she could across the console, holding him while he cried against her shoulder, his whole body shaking. Over his head, she stared out the windshield at the school doors, feeling something helpless and heavy settle into her chest. She didn't know how to fix this. Not this time. The shop was quiet, the way it only got quiet after closing time, when the last customer had gone home, and the only sounds left were the tick of cooling metal and the hum of the old fridge in the corner. Tank sat on a stool by his workbench, elbows on his knees, phone in his hand. The screen lit up his face in the dim light. He scrolled back through the texts, 3 of them, all from Charlie, all from the last 2 days. "Are you coming back?" Mrs. Patterson said, "Maybe not. Is that true?" "Please come back. Please." Tank had read them so many times he had them memorized. He hadn't answered a single one. Not because he didn't want to. He'd started typing back a dozen times, his thick fingers hovering over the little letters, and every time he stopped. What was he supposed to say? "I'm sorry. I got pulled from the school because a woman with a clipboard decided I was dangerous. I'm sorry. A man who yells at his own kid behind closed doors gets to call me the threat." None of it would help. None of it would take that scared look off Charlie's face, the same one Tank had seen behind the dumpster at Miller's gas station all those months ago. He set the phone down on the bench, next to a socket wrench he hadn't put away, and rubbed both hands down his face. Maybe this was always how it was going to end. Maybe he'd been foolish to think a man like him, leather vest, tattoos crawling up his forearms, 20 years of hard road behind him, could just walk into a school and make anything better. He'd seen the way that Whitfield woman looked at him that first day, like he was something draggerous that had wandered too close to her kid. He'd told himself her fear didn't matter, that it was Charlie who mattered, that it was Marcus who mattered. But fear had a way of spreading, didn't it? It climbed over fences quiet as smoke, and now it had found its way into a school board meeting, into a lawyer's letter, into whatever conversation had gotten him quietly uninvited from the one place he'd started to believe he belonged. He thought about Charlie's face the day he'd taught him how to check a bike's oil level, how the boy's whole body had lit up with pride when he got it right. He thought about the crooked grin Charlie wore now some mornings, the one that hadn't been there before. Had he given the kid all that just to snatch it away again? Maybe it would have been kinder never to have shown up at all. Maybe some things were better left alone, even when your gut told you otherwise. The phone buzzed on the bench, rattling against a stray bolt. Tank looked at it, half expecting another text from Charlie he wouldn't know how to answer. But it was a call. "Denise." He picked it up on the second ring. "Denise." "Tank." Her voice was tight, but steady, steadier than he expected. "I need to talk to you." I know, he said before she could go on. I'm sorry. I should have called days ago. I just didn't know what to say. I keep thinking maybe I made things worse. Maybe if I'd never gotten involved, Charlie wouldn't be sitting here missing something he never would have had. Stop. The word came out sharp, but not unkind. Just stop right there. Tank went quiet, gripping the phone a little tighter. You didn't make anything worse, Denise said. You gave my son his life back, Tank. I watched him disappear for months, and I didn't even see it happening because I was so busy trying to keep a roof over our heads. And then you came along, and he started standing up straight again. He started laughing again. You think I'm gonna let some woman with a petition and a scared teacher's lawsuit take that away from him? Take you away from him? Denise, I don't know what I can do. The board already pulled the program. I'm not asking you to fix the board, she said. I'm asking you to trust me. I've got a plan, but I can't do it without you. Denise hung up the phone and sat at her kitchen table for a long moment, staring at the notebook in front of her. It was an old one, spiral-bound, with a coffee stain on the cover from years back. She flipped to a clean page and wrote one word at the top. Names. She thought about Oliver first. Oliver Reyes, no relation to the principal, just a coincidence of last names that always made the front office chuckle. He was a small boy, quiet as a mouse, the kind of kid who ate lunch alone until Tank started walking the halls. Denise remembered Charlie mentioning him once, how the older boys used to shove Oliver into lockers just to hear the bang. That had stopped the week Tank started showing up between classes. She called Oliver's mother, a nurse named Beth who worked long shifts at the hospital. Beth, it's Denise Watts, Charlie's mom. Denise, hi, is everything okay? I need to ask you something, and I need you to hear me out before you say no. She explained it all. The board meeting, the petition, the lawsuit threat from Mr. Ellery. And Tank, the man in the leather vest who'd quietly kept an eye on every kid in that hallway who needed it, including, she suspected, Beth's own son. There was a long pause on the line. Then Beth said, Oliver told me about him. Said there was a big guy who always said good morning to him. Called him by name. Oliver never told me his name stopped getting pushed around until just last week, when I asked why he wasn't complaining about school anymore. Would you come? Would you speak? I'll be there, Beth said. Both of us. Denise wrote Beth and Oliver Reyes on her list and drew a small check mark beside it. Next was Priya Patel. Denise remembered the story from Charlie, how Priya had gotten sick during gym class, dizzy and pale, and how the gym teacher had been busy with the rest of the class. It was Tank who noticed her sitting against the wall. Tank who walked her down to the nurse's office himself, one big hand steady on her shoulder the whole way, talking to her softly about nothing in particular, just to keep her calm until they got there. Priya's mother cried a little on the phone. I never even properly thanked that man, she said. I will absolutely be there. Denise kept going. 2 more calls, 3 more names. A boy whose stutter had gotten better because Tank never once rushed him to finish a sentence. A quiet girl who told her mother, for the first time in months, that she didn't feel scared walking to her locker anymore. By the 3rd night, Denise's notebook page was full. Names, phone numbers, little notes about what each parent might say, how long they thought they could speak, whether their child wanted to stand up to or just wanted their parent to talk for them. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't official. But it was real. And it was hers, built 1 phone call at a time out of a kitchen table and a stubborn refusal to let fear win. The night before the meeting, she drove to Steel Horizon. The shop lights were still on, spilling yellow onto the gravel lot. She found Tank exactly where she expected, hunched over his workbench, staring at nothing in particular. Tank. He looked up, startled, like he hadn't heard the door. She set the notebook down in front of him, open to the full list. "Read it." He picked it up slowly, his thick fingers turning the pages like they were something fragile. His eyes moved down the list, name after name, note after note. Oliver, Priya, others Denise had gathered over 3 days of phone calls and doorstep visits. His jaw tightened. When he looked up at her, his eyes were wet, and he blinked hard, like a man who hadn't let himself cry in a very long time and didn't plan to start now. "Denise, I don't know if I can walk back into that room, not after everything they said about me." "You don't have to walk in alone," she said. "You've got a whole room full of people who saw what you did for their kids. All you have to do is show up and let them speak." Tank looked down at the notebook again, then back at her. Something in his face shifted, the fear still there but no longer the only thing. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll be there." The school board meeting room at Jefferson Middle School had never been so full. Folding chairs lined every wall, and people stood packed shoulder to shoulder in the back near the door. The air smelled like coffee and nervous sweat. Denise sat in the third row, her notebook clutched in her lap, knuckles white around its spiral edge. Charlie sat beside her, his leg bouncing under his chair. Tank stood near the back, arms crossed over his leather vest, trying to make himself smaller. It wasn't working. Every eye in the room found him eventually, then flicked away. Principal Reyes sat at the front table with the 5 board members, his tie a little crooked, his face pale under the fluorescent lights. He tapped the microphone twice. "This meeting will come to order. We're here to discuss the community volunteer program and a formal complaint filed against one of its volunteers." Carol Ann Whitfield was already on her feet before he finished the sentence. She wore a crisp blue blazer and held a stack of papers like a shield. "Thank you, Principal Reyes. I have prepared remarks." She cleared her throat and looked out over the crowd, chin lifted. This board approved a program allowing outside adults, with no formal background in education or child psychology, to walk our hallways unsupervised. I raised concerns months ago about the appropriateness of a man with gang affiliations having access to our children. Those concerns were dismissed. Now we have a formal legal complaint. I think that speaks for itself. A murmur rippled through the room. Denise felt her stomach twist. Mr. Ellery stood next, buttoning his suit jacket with sharp, precise movements. He was a tall man, thin, with the kind of face that looked permanently disappointed. "I want to be clear," he said, his voice cutting and cold. "This is not personal. This is about protocol. This man, Mr. Morrison, involved himself in my son's private counseling matters without my consent. He overstepped every boundary a parent has a right to expect a school to protect. I am formally requesting his immediate removal from this program, and I have retained legal counsel should the board fail to act." The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that presses down on your chest. Reyes shifted in his seat, glancing at the other board members, none of whom would meet his eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Ellery," Reyes said carefully. "Does anyone else wish to—" Denise stood up before he finished. Her chair scraped loud against the floor. "I do." Reyes nodded toward the small podium set up in the aisle. Denise walked to it on legs that didn't feel steady, but her voice came out clear. "My son used to beg me not to make him go to school. He hid bruises from me. He hid all of it because he didn't want to be one more thing I had to carry. Tank Morrison found him crying behind a gas station, and instead of walking away, he called me. He fixed my car. He showed up. And my son is a different kid now." She sat back down. Beth Reyes stood next, Oliver's hand tucked in hers. Then Priya's mother, her voice shaking but steady enough to be heard. Then a father whose son's stutter had eased. One by one they rose, told their small piece of the story, and sat back down until the room felt less like a courtroom and more like a chorus. Carol Ann's papers sat forgotten in her lap. Then, from the side of the room, a boy stood up. Marcus Ellery. His face was pale, his hands trembling at his sides. Mr. Ellery reached for his son's arm, a sharp whisper of, "Sit down," but Marcus pulled free. "I want to say something," Marcus said, his voice cracking halfway through the sentence. Reyes gestured toward the podium, but Marcus shook his head and just spoke from where he stood, gripping the back of the chair in front of him. "Tank didn't yell at me, not once. Even when I was awful, he just talked to me. He helped me understand why I was so angry all the time." Marcus's eyes found Charlie in the crowd. And Charlie's the first real friend I ever had. The room went utterly silent. Every face turned toward the trembling boy standing on shaky legs, his father frozen beside him, the weight of the truth settling over the crowd, like a held breath. Mr. Ellery sat frozen at the front table, his hand still hanging in the air where he'd reached for his son. His face had gone the color of old paper. For a man who always had the right words, who stood in front of classrooms every day with total command, he suddenly looked like he'd forgotten how to speak. The murmurs started small. A whisper here, a shifting of chairs there. But they built, the way water builds before it breaks through a dam, until the whole room seemed to hum with the weight of what Marcus had just said. "Charlie's the first real friend I ever had." Denise looked over at Tank, and even from across the room she could see his jaw tighten, his eyes fixed on Marcus with something that looked like pride and heartbreak all mixed together. Principal Reyes cleared his throat, but before he could say anything, Mr. Ellery stood up. His chair scraped back hard, the sound sharp in the quiet room. He opened his mouth like he was going to defend himself, like he was going to say something about protocol again, about boundaries, about legal counsel. Nothing came out. He looked at Marcus, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in a long while. Marcus was still standing, his hands white-knuckled on the back of the folding chair, his chin trembling but held up anyway. "Marcus," Mr. Ellery started, his voice thin. He stopped. Tried again. "Marcus, The room waited. Nobody moved. Even Carol Ann Whitfield, papers forgotten in her lap, sat perfectly still, watching. Mr. Ellery's shoulders began to shake. It started small, just a tremor, but it grew until the tall, composed man who had walked in with his jacket buttoned and his voice sharp as a blade was standing there, falling apart in front of the whole town. "I don't know how to do this," he said, and his voice cracked wide open. "I don't know how to be... After the divorce, I was so angry all the time, and I didn't know where to put it." He pressed a hand to his mouth for a second, like he was trying to hold the words back. But they came anyway. "I took it out on him, my own son. I told myself I was just trying to make him tough, make him strong, but that wasn't it. I was just angry, and he was there." Tears ran freely down his face now, and he didn't wipe them away. He looked smaller than he had a minute ago, like the suit was too big for him all of a sudden. "I never meant to hurt you like this," he said, turning fully to Marcus now, his voice breaking apart with every word. "I see it now. I see what I did. And I am so sorry, Marcus. I am so sorry." Marcus's own eyes filled up, and for a second neither of them moved, father and son standing several feet apart with a whole room of strangers watching the wall between them crumble. "I need help," Mr. Ellery said quietly, mostly to himself, but the microphone caught it anyway, and it carried out over the silent crowd. "I'm going to get help. I promise you that, Marcus. I promise." Denise felt her own eyes sting. Beside her, Charlie reached over and squeezed her hand. Principal Reyes let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for the whole meeting. He looked at the 4 board members seated beside him, and something passed between them without a single word needing to be said. The board chairwoman, an older woman with silver hair and sharp reading glasses, tapped her microphone gently. "I think," she said, her voice a little unsteady, "we've heard more than enough tonight." She looked down the table at her fellow board members. "All in favor of immediately reinstating Mr. Morrison's position in the community volunteer program?" Every hand went up. Not a single hesitation. "Motion passes unanimously," she said. The room erupted, not into shouting, but into something softer, something like relief breaking loose all at once. Denise pressed a hand over her mouth. Charlie turned and threw his arms around her, and across the room, Tank finally let his arms fall from where they'd been crossed so tight against his chest, like something inside him had been let go. The weeks after the board meeting moved fast, faster than Tank expected anything at Jefferson Middle School to move. Principal Reyes called him the very next morning, sounding lighter than Tank had ever heard him. "We got 3 more applications," he said. "Parents who want to volunteer. Turns out watching a room full of people cry in public does something to a community." Tank laughed at that. A real laugh, the kind that came up from his chest. But it wasn't just parents. Within 2 weeks, Big Sam and Ronnie from the club had filled out the paperwork too. Big Sam was 6'5", with a beard down to his chest and tattoos of his grandkids' names running up both arms. Ronnie was quieter, missing 2 fingers from a work accident years back, but he had a way of talking to kids that made them forget to be scared. Reyes was hesitant at first, still gun-shy from the whole ordeal with Mr. Ellery, but Tank vouched for both of them, and within a month, the hallway supervision program had grown from 1 leather vest to 3. The kids took to it quick. Big Sam started a lunchtime club where kids could ask him anything about engines, and pretty soon there was a line out the cafeteria door. Ronnie helped a stuttering 4th grader learn to whistle, of all things, patient every single day until the kid finally got it right and grinned like he'd won the lottery. And then there was Carol Ann Whitfield. She showed up at Tank's shop on a Tuesday afternoon, still in her PTA blazer, looking like she wasn't sure she was in the right place. Tank wiped his hands on a rag and walked over, careful to keep his voice easy. "Mrs. Whitfield?" he said. "Everything all right?" She twisted her hands together. "I found out something," she said. "About my son. About Daniel." Tank waited. "He told me last night that you've been eating lunch with him twice a week since September," she said, her voice cracking just slightly. "He's shy. He's always been shy. I didn't even know he was struggling until he told me you sat with him because nobody else would." Tank shifted, a little embarrassed. "He's a good kid," he said simply. "Just needed somebody to notice him." Carol Ann's eyes filled up. "I started that petition against you," she said. "I said things I shouldn't have. And this whole time you were protecting my son, and I didn't even know it." Tank shook his head slow. "You didn't know what you didn't know," he said. "That's all." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, laughing a little at herself. "Well," she said, "I'm not going to just apologize. I'm going to fix it. I already talked to Reyes. I want to help expand the program. Get more parents involved, more community members, whatever it takes." And she meant it. Within a month, Carol Ann Whitfield, the same woman who'd started a petition with the words biker gang member scrawled across the top, was standing at TOM meetings with a clipboard of her own, signing up new volunteers and shutting down anybody who dared bring up old rumors. Denise watched it all unfold with something like wonder. The Wives Auxiliary had already wrapped around her these past weeks, bringing meals, watching Charlie when her shifts ran long, helping her patch up the old car whenever it sputtered. But it was in early November when Linda, one of the auxiliary wives, sat her down at the shop and told her about an opening at the front desk of a dental office. Day shift only. Steady hours, decent pay. Denise cried when she got the job. She cried again when she realized what it meant. That evening, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she came home before dark. She didn't have to rush through dinner between shifts, didn't have to leave Charlie a note on the counter with reheating instructions. She made spaghetti. Nothing fancy. Just butter and sauce and garlic bread from the freezer, but she took her time with it, stirring slow, humming to herself. Charlie set the table without being asked. They sat down together, just the two of them, steam rising off their plates, and for a long moment neither of them said anything at all. Charlie finally looked up. "This is nice," he said simply. Denise reached over and squeezed his hand. "Yeah, baby," she said, her voice thick. "It really is." They ate slow that night, no rush, no clock to watch, just the quiet sound of forks against plates and the warm light of the kitchen wrapped around them both. Saturday morning came up bright and clean over Steel Horizon, the kind of sky that looked like somebody had scrubbed it just for the occasion. Rows of motorcycles lined the parking lot already, chrome catching the sun, engines ticking as they cooled from the ride in. Bikers stood around in small clusters, laughing, checking straps, drinking coffee out of paper cups. The annual charity poker run always brought out half the county, riders coming from 3 towns over just to be part of it, all raising money for the Children's Hospital 2 counties north. Charlie showed up at 9 sharp, and Tonk spotted him before the car even finished pulling into the lot. The boy near about tumbled out of Denise's car. He was so excited. He had on a helmet already, way too big, sliding down over his eyebrows, and a jacket zipped up to his chin, even though it wasn't cold. Denise followed behind him, laughing, trying to keep up. "Slow down," she called after him. "He's not going anywhere without you." Charlie skidded to a stop in front of Tank anyway, breathless. "Am I late? Did I miss anything?" Tank crouched down, same as he always had, and pushed the helmet up off the boy's eyes. "Right on time," he said. "Come on. Got something for you before we head out." He led Charlie into the shop, back past the row of half-fixed bikes, to the little office in the back where he kept the paperwork nobody ever wanted to look at. There was a box sitting on the desk, plain brown cardboard, nothing special about it from the outside. "Go on," Tank said. "Open it." Charlie's hands were shaking a little when he pulled the flaps back. Inside was a small leather vest, kid-sized, soft black leather that still smelled new. He lifted it out slow, like it might disappear if he moved too fast, and that's when he saw the stitching on the back. "Little brother." The letters were done up in white thread, careful and neat, curved in an arch same as the patches the grown men wore on their own cuts. Charlie didn't say anything for a second. He just stared at it. "Big Sam's wife stitched it," Tank said, voice rough around the edges. "Took her 3 tries to get the letters straight. Said she wanted it perfect. Is this really mine?" Charlie asked, looking up at him. "Yours," Tank said. "You're part of this family now, Charlie, been part of it for a while. Figured it was time you had something that showed it." Charlie pulled it on right there, over his jacket, and it fit close enough. He turned in a slow circle, looking down at himself, and then he looked up at Tank with an expression that near about broke the big man's heart in the good way. The way that happens when something busted finally gets put back together. "Let's ride," Tank said, clearing his throat. Outside, the lot had filled up even more. Bikes revved in low rolling waves, that deep rumble that shook the ground a little. Tank swung his leg over his own bike, and Charlie climbed on behind him, small arms wrapping tight around his middle. Helmet snug now that Tank had cinched the strap. Off to the side, Marcus stood next to his father's car, both of them dressed for the ride, though Mr. Ellery would be following behind in the support vehicle instead of on a bike. Things between them were still healing, slow and careful, but Mr. Ellery had shown up. That was the part that mattered. He gave Tank a small nod, and Tank nodded back. Marcus jogged over before they pulled out. "Hey, Charlie," he said. "Nice vest." Charlie grinned so wide it looked like it might hurt. "Thanks," he said. "See you at the first stop?" "Wouldn't miss it," Marcus said, and jogged back toward the support car where his father waited with the engine already running. Tank looked back over his shoulder. "Ready?" "Ready," Charlie said. And his voice didn't shake at all. The engines roared up together, one after another, until the whole lot sounded like thunder rolling across open ground. Tank pulled out first, and behind him the bikes followed in a long, gleaming line, chrome flashing gold in the afternoon sun. Charlie held on tight, grinning ear to ear, the wind pulling at his jacket, the patch on his back catching the light every time they leaned into a turn. They rode off together, dozens strong, out toward the open road and the wide stretch of golden afternoon ahead. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.